This event was a complete failure. These raids were beyond extraordinarily mishandled. And today, we're going to be going over why they were mishandled, how they were mishandled, and how Game Freak is going to need to fix these in the future if they plan on ever doing these again. But before we get into that, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and comment below what the biggest disappointment of this raid was for you, and if there was actually anything you enjoyed about it, because there was one thing about it I enjoyed, and that was just the sheer amount of money you got, but we'll get into that a bit later. But the rest of it was completely mishandled. This was a complete tragedy, because for the last 6 months we've actually been doing a Shiny Living Dex on the channel, and with exclusively locking Gimmighoul to these raids with 1 in 4,100 odds, worse than non-Shiny Charm odds, a lot of other people who are doing the same thing also are suffering the same fate. The big problem is, of course, Shiny Gimmighoul. Oh, not really the Shiny itself, even though many people find the Shiny underwhelming and disappointing. It's that it is almost unnoticeable when in the raids. It doesn't do the sparkle effect. So you need to either catch every single one of these Gimmighoul, unless you can spot the very subtle slight difference, and it is only in level 5 raids. Meaning, you're getting very few raids done, and raids in the raid search system, they're gone basically instantly. Yes, Shiny Gimmighoul is obtainable within Pokemon Go, but this actually really doesn't matter. The main reason is, Pokemon Go doesn't really benefit Game Freak directly. They receive a small amount of the revenue from it, and they actually want the audience to be flowing backward. They want it to be going from Go into the main games, not, well, I need to go get Shiny Gimmighoul, I can only get it in Go now, so go play Go. They want it to be going the other way. They want people to be playing the main games, because they don't really see much income from that. That's Niantic's territory. So it really doesn't make sense if the idea is, well, we're going to make Shiny Gimmighoul rare, give people a taste, and make them want to go play Go. It just does not mesh with the actual business layout. And before Scarlet and Violet, Pokemon has done fantastic raid events. Look back at Sword and Shield. The Shiny Shelter event, the Shiny Zorua event, the Shiny Magikarp event. These had very good rewards, in terms of the Pokemon itself being the Shiny, with very reasonable odds. And even within Scarlet Violet itself, there were previous very successful raid events. So, why was this one a complete failure? Because all of the previous raids, aside from, well, the Blissey Terra raid event in Scarlet Violet, and the Mewtwo raid event, the Zeraora raid event, the Urshifu raid event, and the Glastrier Spectre raid events back in Sword and Shield, the Pokemon you get was the reward itself, not as much the reward items. Those other events, again, all of those ones were in Sword and Shield, aside from the Blissey event. The rewards were what were important because they were extremely rare items. With the Blissey event, we'll go into that a little bit later about why that was such a huge success, but when the reward is the Pokemon itself, and the raid rewards are kind of underwhelming for the vast majority of people, and the Pokemon itself is underwhelming, the raid event becomes underwhelming. This is the reason why all the level 7 Terra events, for the starters, like Charizard, Greninja, Decidueye, no one really cares about them after maybe 2 days, because you can only get one of them, and then there's really no point in continuing to raid the Pokemon. Maybe you get a whole bunch of Terra Charge you need for a certain typing, or maybe some self-fodder items, but really, the Pokemon itself is the reward. And once that is gone, there's no reason to really get hyped about it. With this, the event Pokemon was so disastrously handled, your ability to actually get the event Pokemon is almost zero. Now, I did say that there was one success about it, and that was the sheer amount of money you can grind from this event. I was doing this event pretty aggressively, trying to get as many self-fodder items as possible, all the nuggets, and just anything you can sell because you get a lot of stuff from it. But the reason that applies to me is that I play a lot of competitive. I need to buy a lot of vitamins, a lot of items, a lot of mints, and this helps to fund that. It's better than going and just mindlessly bashing the Ace Academy tournament for literally hours a day to just get my teams built. This was fairly simple, very quick, and nets even more money. But not everyone plays competitive. And that's really why it failed. It appeals to such a narrow spectrum of players, and there's really not much extra rewards for people who are more casual. Now, the Blissey event, you get a whole lot of experience candy. That was helpful for leveling up all of your Pokemon to fill out your Pokedex. getting Terra Shards for competitive, and that applies to most people. The other part was that Blissey came out much earlier. You also got far more Terra Shards. With this one, you got pretty much the same amount of Terra Shards you normally get. With Blissey, you would get probably 15 to 20 Terra Shards, and then probably 5 for 7 other typings. This is just one typing. Not even good for Terra Shard grinding. Again, it helps to cut down competitive grind, but only for competitive players, which made it a pretty massive flop. Now, going back to comparisons to previous events and why I can sort of see why they didn't make the shiny odds so absurd, because 2% shiny odds for this thing would have been kind of insane. Back in Sword and Shield, the event raids were 2% shiny odds. It was extremely easy to go out and get a whole bunch of shinies for a Pokemon that is meant to be kind of a special Pokemon. Gimmighoul is sort of in a weird category of not necessarily a mascot for the generation, but a sort of unofficial secondary mascot. And with this release supposed to be sort of a special event for it, giving 2% shiny odds for it would be honestly more harmful than good. Because it would completely diminish the value of how special it is, being, again, 2% is extremely common. That's maybe 50 raids in order to get, which is not hard to do when an event runs for a little over a week. So I can see them have definitely scaling down the shiny odds. You know, maybe something more reasonable, like 1 in 400, maybe 1 in 500 would be reasonable, not 1 in 4,100. Which gets me to a second point we're going to be getting a bit later, and that is, I think these events were bugged. The reason why I say that they're bugged is, well, they did imply that there was going to be a bit of a boosted shiny odd for this thing. Not necessarily, again, astronomically high, but generally the implication was that it was going to have been boosted. The other thing that suggests that these were bugged is that the sparkles don't appear. When you get a shiny in a regular Terra raid, as I've actually gotten a couple of them historically, they make the sparkles. So, because it didn't have boosted shiny odds and it didn't make the sparkles, that makes me think they just had some coding wrong for it. Or because the way it actually generates raid dens, something about it didn't line up correctly. Because again, Terra raids are programmed very, very differently than Dynamax raids were, so you can't just port over the same coding. They had to rebuild everything from scratch, and with a new coding, with something like this, there was going to be some issues. Which means they didn't just plug in a shiny will appear. They changed something. This event's raid coding was different, and that difference interfered with the normal process of the raid, meaning they were intending to have something different be here, and something prevented that. Some conflict within the coding stopped that. Which means these were bugged. This was not supposed to be a disaster. And historically, they have rerun events to fix raid bugs. The only other thing I can think of for why they didn't have the odds be as absurd as they normally were is that it is well known by this point if people get very high yield Urban Mystica raids, or if people get very, they get shiny raids in general, they will go into places like Discord, Twitter, Reddit, and, post, I have a shiny event raid for this thing, come on and join. Or I have a great Urban Mystica raid, and just keep resetting it for hours and hours and hours. And maybe this was to sort of counteract that, or maybe encourage that? It doesn't make sense if this was the case. I feel that I feel deliberately making the odds worse to sort of encourage people to collaboratively raid and share I have a shiny raid is a bit counterintuitive, but I guess in a twisted way it does make some logical sense. But I see this as being the least likely reason why this happened. Because yes, we do share out raids. We will reset raids for more people to get something that is rare because we can just get it ourselves. We want to let other people get it. So, but the issue is then by having the raids be so low, so few people can actually get the raid to help other people get it. It doesn't make sense if that was the case. And I've seen a few people suggesting this, but this just doesn't make sense. Now, and here's my personal thought on this. This was a test. They're trying to do a new style of Terra raid event, so it's not just, here's a one-time catch of a mightiest marked Pokemon. Here's not just experience Candy Blissey raid. This is, I think, meant to be a bit of a new genre of Terra raid events, which are more prolonged and will gradually have special events going for everything. Maybe they're not going to do Dynamax Adventures equivalent sort of things and have maybe this be how you get shiny legendaries in this game. I don't think it's going to be that, but I've seen possibly So I'm thinking about maybe they're going to do shiny legendary releases. I don't think so, but I think it's probably a new type of raid where they're going to have shiny rare Pokemon be possible in raids. And if this was a test, it went horribly, but the good thing about a test when it goes badly is you can always improve with the mistakes of it. And we've actually created a list of ways that these could be improved going forward. And comment below what your personal improvements for these would actually be. Whether you agree with us, whether you disagree with us, whether you think maybe we need to go further with some of them, and let us know. Number 1, and by Arceus, the biggest one, fix the odds. Again, I can respect not doing 2% shiny odds for something that is supposed to be special, but not beyond full odds. Again, something more reasonable like 1 in 400, 1 in 500 seems a bit more tame, seems a bit more reasonable. Maybe 1 in 300. So that way you're not just tripping over shinies every single time you raid, but it's also rare enough to still be valuable. But also easily enough accessible that most people can get them. Fix number 2 was fix the event, so if it wasn't just a shiny release, make that stated. This is what actually made the issue the most problematic. Many of us assumed that this was going to be a shiny event where we can get our shiny Gimmighoul, and then the raid rewards are kind of a peripheral benefit, which is what they've actually had for every single raid. The raid rewards are not really the main attraction, it's the Pokemon itself. Again, Blissey was the exception, because we knew going into it, it's just a way of grinding Terror Shards, it's just a way of grinding experience candies. There was no expectation of wanting the event Blissey, because there was nothing special about them. But everything else was always about the Pokemon itself being the reward. Again, if it was just money, say, yeah, it's just a way to get a crap ton of money. That would fix everything. We wouldn't have gone in with the expectation of a shiny. Fix 3. Make all of the raids shiny possible for the Gimmighoul event. Not just the 5 stars. The main reason for this is level 3 and level 4 raids were completely irrelevant. No one wanted to do them. And they just consumed raids on your actual overworld map. If you would go to a 3-star raid and say maybe it had lower odds, so maybe say level 5s were 1 in 300 odds or 1 in 400, maybe 3 stars were 1 in 600. So it's harder to get from it, but it's still not completely worthless, and there is a reason to go and do it. This would further increase accessibility by, well, more raids are able to be done, and you can just go to any of the, aura-giving event raids, and you have a chance of getting a shiny. Not, oh, it's a level 4, it's a level 3, this is a waste of time. Fix 4, fix the sparkles. This really shouldn't need explanations. And number 5, better rewards. We sort of mentioned this in 1, but this is, again, more hammering on the comment of the regular raids in Scarlet and Violet. They're not about the event end of raid rewards, it's about the Pokemon itself being the reward. This is, again, a big problem, because after you get the event Pokemon, the event after you get the event Pokemon, the event itself is almost meaningless. This is why Blissey was kind of an exception, and why the legendary and mythical events back in Sword and Shield were different. Because you got very rare, very valuable, very hard to get items for relatively easily. And especially with Zero Aura, it was you got shiny Zero Aura at the end with, okay, you did enough raids, here's a Zero Aura. Ability patches, ability capsules, experience candies, Terror Shards, unless these are given out in exceedingly high quantities, they're really not as motivating. Granted, if this event actually came out, say, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, it would probably be held as one of the best raid events there were. Money grinding was incredibly annoying for the past several months, but as time has gone on, we've figured out much more easy ways of just grinding money en masse. If this came out, say, more towards the release of Scarlet and Violet, allowing us to get a jump on getting money, I think it would be far better received, because at this point, it's not much of a point. Again, unless you're someone like me who does a lot of competitive, you really don't need absurd quantities of money. Because it would have heavily reduced grind that really set in and was kind of a mood killer for a lot of people, especially getting into competitive. Again, I do a lot of competitive. I know more than most people how annoying it is to just mindlessly bash the Ace Academy tournament for hours to get money. This would have solved a lot of that early on. And I suspect with the introduction of so many Pokemon from Legends and from Sword and Shield, this is why this event was done now, to get people able to bring in so many Pokemon and build them up for competitive viability, because it was very shortly after those Pokemon became legal for VGC usage. I think there's definitely a connection. And this is why I think likely this was just a test run. There's a lot of problems with it, and we've seen from the past level 7 Terror Raid events that Game Freak improves and changes them. Now, improves in the case of the level 7 raid events was make them more and more absurd, but I think for this case, they're going to make these raids better going forward. This is going to be maybe a monthly thing, maybe every 2 months, sort of like how the Blissey event was a while back, where they do it 1 month, they do it the next month, and it's sort of a grind spree. You know, if you want to grind to get some stuff, you can do it. It reduces grind for the future. But I don't see this being as a one and done. I suspect Shiny Gimmighoul is going to be back, possibly with increased odds, or maybe even when we get the DLC areas, they're going to have just Shiny Gimmighoul be maybe soft reset huntable. But if you guys haven't done so already, please do not forget to leave a like, subscribe for more. We upload daily, we stream daily, we do shiny reactions, we do all sorts of things, and we do take viewer requests for series to do Let's Plays of. We are, of course, working on a shiny living dex. Hope to see you there, and let's roll-y-coly out.